Hi, I'm Maggie,
Hi, I'm Grace, and this is
a very bookish podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to episode 47, oh my gosh, of a Very Bookish podcast. Today is going to be a little bit different than our usual episode. We are going to be doing a book review of the book You Had Me At Hola by Hola. I said that wrong, oh my gosh, by Alexis Daria. We are going to be doing a little review, so we will have the timestamp down below of the time when you can go to check out her interview. She will be on later in the episode. There's about an hour clip that what we talked to her about. Anything else, Grace, before we get started into this spoiler session?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys to hear our interview portion because it's really good.
It was surreal. Like it was like I don't know. Like we've had Katie on, we've had Ben, we've had Nisha, but Alexis just felt so like I don't know, regal is what I should say.
It's a different vibe, and that's
Yeah.
what I like about all of these authors. And I'm glad that all of you guys are able to listen in and kind of see a little bit more of them. I mean, we read their books and we fall in love with all of their works, but it's different being able to hear them and being able to hear them talk about what they're passionate about, what they do. And yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
special.
Well, especially because with You Had Me at Hola, you read this in like earlier in the year.
I read this in February. I distinctly remember reading it in February because, like you guys may know, I'm a very visual person. And for February, the month of love, supposedly, I wanted to do pink or red books. That was my motivation for my TBR in February. And I had You Had Me At Hola for like about a month or two, and it's like rom-com. And yeah, that basically kind of like started the contemporary romance kind of era.
So to get started, yeah, we just had a little technical difficulties. I'm a little dumb, so this is clipping.
Totally
But
fine.
I read the book last week, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. And what were your first thoughts when you read this book?
So okay. This book is based on Latinx main character. She's Boricua. And Jasmine is this actress who is trying to make it big, trying to, get her feet running under her. And, she gets a spot on this novela, which is like a Hispanic soap opera. And she gets a part on it in Los Angeles. And she originally thought that she was going to be the main star of the show. And then she finds out that no, she's going to have a male lead as well, as what happens with all novelas. And this guy that is her lead is a pretty well-known telenovela star.
Is it in Los Angeles or New York?
Her family is based in New York.
Oh, okay. I thought she was in New York.
Was she in New York?
This takes place in New York, Grace.
Oh, it does. It does.
Yeah. Okay.
My bad.
From Los Angeles.
She's from New York, but she lives in Los Angeles.
And then she's back in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was when you were saying that, I was looking at you and I was like,
I was like, yeah, it's okay. It's been a while. Okay. Anyways, Victor, he's a pretty well-known telenovela star. He already has his standing behind him. He already has an audience. But he's struggling to make a comeback because of other things that happened in his life, and he kind of pulled back from like the stardom and all of that. And their first meeting was very adorable.
It was chaotic. That's what it was.
It
but it was like
so
meet cute. It was a meet cute.
It was so cute.
Like the trope of like them like being one of them being clumsy and like bumping into each other trope is always like such like a cute little thing, especially when like it's him who is like not the one who's like in the wrong, but he was the one who like spilled coffee on her, and it's like, oh, and he's like, so he feels so bad about
He
it
feels
too.
so bad. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is hola.
Yeah.
And
And
like
I was just
that's
like,
like I was like, oh, the title's right in there, And
I didn't realize that until like halfway through the book. I was like, oh, the first word he said to her was hola.
hola.
And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god.
It was really, really cute. And I like that one thing I really like about this book is that it's dual POV, even though it's like third person.
Mm-hmm.
It's dual POV, so you do flip back and forth between Jasmine and Victor. And I love that because like honestly, being inside Victor's head, I
I mean,
number
Ashton.
one, oh yeah, I keep calling him Victor because that's how he is in his
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, in his role. I know.
In his
You
role.
were saying
Girl,
and
it's
I was
been a while.
I was like, are you
For
talking about
me,
the next
for
book?
me, honestly, I interject Jasmine with Carmen, even though
They
that's who
are.
she is in the show.
Well,
Anyways,
because of the scenes, the TV, the when they're acting it out, you get their like
yeah.
the actor's perspective as the character. So
You would think that I would know more about this book, especially because it's one of my favorites. But that's another thing too. Like when we're watching their scenes, when they're acting, when Ashton is Victor, and you see Victor and him like, doing all of his things and doing his scenes, but like the feeling is there. The feeling is there. It's there. Like you see it building up and you see that romance already like blooming for him. Number one, he already feels bad about how things are playing out between them, but then, it goes fine. And then we have like in his real self, Ashton. Honestly, when I read all of his chapters, my anxiety level was so high. Like
I
it's something about his scenes and his like emotions because
he's a
he is
very
a very
anxious person.
he is.
He is a very anxious person. And like I related to it a lot because like since we're like basically all spoiling it, you kind of see like how is suffering from PTSD, and you see how that affects like his everyday life, and you see how I loved how Jasmine called it out, and she was like, you can't when he was talking about trying to be private while also being a public figure, it's very hard to do that. And it's like you can't, I mean, we've seen like people hide their pregnancies and stuff. Kylie Jenner, so many people have like hidden their pregnancy. Mindy Kaling has hidden the like father of her child. And it's like, but you still have to give in the public eye. Like that's what being a like as content creators, we're constantly like telling everything about ourselves to like interact with our audience, and like you see how the PTSD has affected him in that way where he's so traumatized to even talk about like even mention a son and stuff that he doesn't even tell Jasmine of all people. And it's like I felt when she was like hurt by that. It's like I felt that. I was like I understood, but like you're like, "Oh,
Yeah, it was like a very like tough situation because it's just like you are in both of their heads, so you
yes."
know where both
Which
of
is
them are
why I love
coming
dual
from.
POV. Which is why I love dual POV because like you can see it from both sides, and it's like you empathize with him and you're like, I totally get why you're doing this and stuff, but then you're like, but it's also
But you
like
got to give her a chance. You
you
got
got to give
because
her a
she
chance,
she wants to step up.
and she doesn't, and like you can't live in fear for your whole life. And I think it I think the way she wrote the book is like you didn't understand it was PTSD. Like a lot of people don't. Like you don't understand that you're suffering from that, and that you've been traumatized by a certain event in your life until you go to therapy, until you get help, and you're like, and you realize like you have like a post-traumatic stress disorder where you're getting anxiety from all of this stuff, and it's these minor triggers, and like telling your girlfriend about your child, like that's like it was just the way she did it made it so beautiful where it's like even the reader, I didn't realize it until the very end at the epilogue when he talked about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that explains
Yeah.
everything. And I think it
Yeah,
was beautifully written that way where it's like because I feel like now the word like traumatized and stuff is such like a like popular thing to say. Like I say it all the time. But like those people who do suffer from it sometimes don't even realize it, and it's an interesting perspective when it comes to mental health in the book, where it's not like the first thing you realize that it is.
Yeah, I liked how do I say this? How it just kind of blended in with the story in a sense that it wasn't like identified that that's what it was. So like the
Yeah.
reader had to like discover it along with him. And I like that Alexis does that with a lot of different themes in her book. Like we have all different types of characters with all different types of like, whatever.
Hmm.
And it's not identified as that one thing. Or if it is, it's it's very with the flow. It kind of blends in with the story and it just
Hmm.
goes along with it. It's not like this like standing pillar, like this is this and that's that, because you get that with like all of the other actors on set and all of the other cast members, that when they go out to hang out, like you see like a lot of them are LGBTQ plus, and a lot of them are different types of Latinx. There you have Boricua, you have like Hispanic, Mexican, and you have like all these different types of people, but it's just a normal thing. It just kind of goes with it. And
Yeah.
it's a pretty nice thing to see it from a like, yeah, it's a Latinx book, but then you get all of this different kind of
It,
diversity in a
yeah, it
sense.
shows the diversity within it, because I feel like when we think of Latinx, we just think Mexican, Spanish, and Puerto Rican. That's all. When you think like I'm a white person, so this is what I'm gonna give
I
a
know. I was like,
white person's
well, I
point of
wouldn't
view.
think that.
But
But then I'm
like
like, well, duh,
as
Grace,
a
because you are.
yeah, it's like yeah, and that's the thing is like I mean I know that Latinx, but a lot of like regular like Americans who who haven't had like a bunch of friends from different like communities and stuff, like they think when they think of Latinx, they think, oh, that's just Mexican and Spanish. Spanish as
Yeah.
in being Spain, for those who don't know, because I didn't know that for the longest time. When people were like, oh, I'm Spanish, I was like, oh, so you're from Mexico? And they're like, no, I'm from Spain. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, because that's not something that in fucking Texas, they don't teach you that kind of shit.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, there are a couple different terms that identify Spanish speaking countries or Latino countries. So Latinx, Latino, Latina, it's a term used for countries in Central America mostly and South America. You can be Latino and you can be Hispanic. Hispanic is a term used to describe any country that is Spanish speaking, Spanish from Spain. So, for example, like Portugal and Belize would not fall into Hispanic because they do not speak Spain
And
Spanish.
Brazilians, they speak Portuguese, right? So,
So those would not count, right?
yeah.
But then you have Latino, which is only Americas. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And it's a different term and different from how you identify as well. Like somebody like me, I could choose to identify as Latinx or Latina. It's up to me. It's my choice. It's everyone's choice. Like there's this like huge thing right now with like our whole community deciding if that's like, are we validating that term or not? And it's kind of like the thing where it's kind of up to you, the same way that you would with like your pronouns and things like that. Being forced to conform to Latinx is, may feel like you're taking away that part of yourself that is also part of your pronoun and part of your gender.
Do you
So
want to say real quick what's the difference between Latinx and Latina? For the
Latinx is just gender neutral. It's just like it's an umbrella term. It's very, very new. It I want to say maybe in the last 5, maybe 3 years, that's where it's really starting to like gain ground.
Mhm.
But it's something very fairly new that people are still trying to adjust to it, if they use it at all. Latina is, female Latin person.
Yeah.
Latino is the masculine form of the word. It's just that, because like Spanish is very masculine and feminine. So it's in the language. That's how it
Yeah.
is. We have masculine words for things, feminine words for things. It's all depending on like the language itself. So how we are call ourselves is also rooted in that. Latinx is just like a way to take off the masculine and feminine word of it, but it's new. People are still trying. It's a huge argument on whether to use it or not, but me, I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
I most of the time, if I'm not talking to other people like in other communities, I'll say Latinx. But if I'm just being normal, I'm Latina. Like that's what it is, because
Do you think you could refer to like yourself as like I'm Latina, but then when you're talking about the community, it's like Latinx, or do you, why is it? I know this is kind of going away from the book. But this is very important to like the understanding like kind of the history behind like, because a lot of people will like when they recommend books and stuff, they're like, oh, these are Latinx books and stuff, and like when you think of that, it's like it's not just Latina and Latino, it's like both. So do you think you like it's interchangeable really when it comes to using that?
Latinx is just how you would use they them,
Yeah.
and that's like the simplest way to
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
cross that bridge. Um, it's different for other people. You can use Latinx as an umbrella
Mm-hmm.
so that it's identifying everyone.
Yeah.
You could say Latino. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Latino. You won't. People, especially people within the community, can't come at you for
Mm-hmm.
saying Latino when that's what it's been
Fair
for
enough.
the longest time, and it's accurate.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
and you will most likely, I want to say 8 out of 10, you'll get people coming into your comments. Out of 8 out of 10 of those will be other people saying it's not Latino, it's Latinx, who from people who are not in the community,
Yeah.
and they do not matter when
Yeah.
you're identifying it. They don't matter. You could say Latino America, it doesn't matter. But that it's the same thing. It's the same thing to me. It's the same thing.
It's just like a
Uh,
white thing to do when like I see comments of like white people talking about like POC issues or anything, and I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up, colonizer. We're like just shut the fuck up and
I mean,
let them
you'll
do it.
get people who are just like, oh, I'd prefer you to do it. Then if they say that, then you can be like, okay, then yeah, then you can correct it. But if you don't know, Latino is fine. Latinx is fine too. Latinx, if you want to be on the safe side, you could say that. It's no one's gonna say that you're wrong for it.
Mhm.
People who are still, I don't know about that term yet, can be fine, but I don't. Right now, it's kind of that issue where you can use both and it's interchangeable. It's not like, oh, this is definitive. This is the only thing that we
Mhm.
can use and that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's not
That's not how
accurate
it
either.
works. Yeah.
It's not how it works. So if you're out there and you're doing rec videos, you can use Latinx just to be, I don't want to say part of like the woke culture, but kind of, just to be on the safe side, and just because that's what you feel comfortable
Yeah.
identifying that gender neutral term. It's fine. If
Mhm.
that's the type of person you are, that's how you are.
Mhm.
If you also grew up with Latino, then say Latino. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I Me personally, I'm fine with both. Other people, they're more like, no, I want it like this, which is completely fine as well. So
Yeah.
I don't care. Me, I'm fine. I'm always like that. It's fine. Anyways, back to this book.
Sorry, Calvin. We will get back to talking about this book.
Calvin can't get mad at us for this.
I know. If Calvin tries to come for us,
You can't get mad at that. So
we'll come for you.
Back to this book, and we're getting this. I do want to talk about this. I have heard from other people that they did not like this book because they felt that it was stereotypical. And to that, I have to say, she's writing from like, first of all, she's Latina. She's Latinx. Number two, the main characters are Latinx. Number three, she's Boriqueña, and so is the main character, you know?
I think there's a difference between writing a stereotype when it's like we have Elle Kennedy's book where she heavily stereotypes her characters, where it's like it's not in their cultural setting, it's outside of their cultural setting, and it's like a personality trait of the characters that is very stereotypical. Like that's the difference versus like this whole book is about the community and like how they live their lives. And I like, for me, I wouldn't be able to tell if it's stereotypical because I never get called like stereotypes like that. Like I don't know. I know a lot of like the stereotypes when it comes to a setting outside of the community, but within the community there could be like stereotypes that some people felt uncomfortable with. But was it like, do you know if it was Latinx creators or
I got so from this, it's mostly been people outside of the community saying this, and it's kind of like, bitch, shut up. Because
do they feel uncomfortable? Is that why? Like they're like, oh, this is stereotypical.
I don't know.
They just don't understand that like it's not stereotypical because it's just like their setting. Like might be.
It is what it is.
Like it's just. You said you
honestly
related a lot to the book.
Honestly, when I was reading the book, I felt like I was reading about my cousins. I felt like I was reading about my family.
That's what's the important part. Like she's not writing for white. She's not writing for white readers to try and like bend to their idea of what the Latinx community is and what a Hispanic household looks like. Like, no, she's writing from her experiences and stuff. And like, I'm sorry, but if that makes you uncomfortable and you think it's stereotypical, like,
it was definitely like when I heard that some people were saying this, I was just like, dude, shut up. Because number one, hundreds of families all across America who are Latinx families all have very similar experiences. How they interact with each other, how they talk with each other. Yeah, their accents might be a little bit different. They might interchange a couple of words or different things, but we are all the same. We're all the same in the sense that, you know, we're here living in America. We have these customs that we keep to ourselves. How we treat our family members, how we treat the women in our family, how we treat our mothers, how we treat our cousins, you know, big families, like you see these things. First of all, you see these things on TikTok, and then you get like all of these Latinx people in the comments saying these things about like, dude, for sure, like that's exactly it. Like, no, one of like the biggest stereotypes that are out there. I'm using quotation marks because when I use stereotypes, it's just, but one of the biggest things is like when you're having a party and you say 6 o'clock.
I knew exactly what you were going to say because this is true for you. This is so true for you. You
can't say 6 o'clock. You have to say
6.
You have to say like 3 o'clock.
Yeah. You've talked about this. You
I've
literally
talked about this so much
you've
because
talked.
it's a huge thing, and people are just like, oh, that's a stereotype that we always show up late. But is it?
A
But
great
is it? But
great
is it?
forget
Come on.
all the time. Like what time?
Literally, it's not like, a thing that's like only like, oh, only Mexicans do it. That's not true, because we all do it. We all
Yeah.
do it. We all do it. Puerto Ricans, hella late. Hella late. That's the number one thing. Salvadorians? Psh, psh. What? Come on. It's a thing. And it's a thing that we joke about because we know, and it's like, okay, but I will give an exception to that rule, because like if you're having tacos, or if you're having any type of food, and you say that the food dude is leaving at 8 and he's serving food from 6 to 8, oh, best believe we're gonna be there at 6. Best believe we're gonna be there at 6. We're not missing that food. Hell no. Okay. But outside of that, another thing, huge families. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, it's such a stereotype for them to have the huge families. But isn't.
Like I
It's
think
not.
also like a lot of like Hispanic communities are very rooted in Catholicism, I
Oh
would
yeah.
say. And Catholics love to make babies. Like my family, my grandma's side is Catholic. She has like 9 siblings. Like
Oh yeah.
my
It's a thing.
my friend has like 7 siblings as well, and she's Catholic. It's like it's just a thing where it's like not I'm not saying all Latinx Hispanic communities are Catholic, but it's like definitely Catholicism has at least a lot of the Latinx people that I know
Oh yeah. It's big
Catholics.
time. Heavy Catholicism is definitely rooted in there. We got some Christians in there too,
Yeah,
but Pentecostals too. But
that's true.
it's rooted a lot
I
of
also go to a Catholic
Catholicism,
school.
thanks to colonizers doing their job and doing what they do. It is what it is. But and that's part of it too. That's another thing, Catholicism and us having like, the jewelry and but it's not outside. It's not limited to, or
Yeah, that's
exclusive and limited to. It's not that.
yeah,
And people have to realize is that when they come across things that are universal but more focused on certain things, it's not a stereotype,
yeah.
because it's not just one person saying that, oh, that's what it is. And my thing also with like the spicy Latina thing, I'm kind of like iffy on that, depending on how it's written, because I know so many people who fit into the spicy Latina character, but it's not because that's what they're trying to be. It's just who they are. It's just what they, grew up with being. And I do understand that the stereotype that it comes with it, and especially because of like, how the spicy Latina is portrayed in a lot of media and movies and TV shows and other books, and how harmful it is to other Latinx people. I completely understand that. And I do feel that pain that we can't be more than that. But it's also that thing when you have a book with multiple diverse people, and also having that person there,
It can't be stereotypical because you're representing so many of the community.
you're representing a lot of people from the community. You can also have like the quiet Latina who doesn't do anything but just does her work. First off, that fits a lot of brown people. It's not just like, Hispanic people or Latino people. It's
Mhm.
a lot of brown people, and
Yeah.
it doesn't, we don't have a one shoe fits all with all of these things. And for
Mhm.
people to kind of come at it and be like, oh, well, you can't say that because you're not part of the community, and yet you're speaking over people who are in the community who are saying like, oh, but we are like that.
Mhm.
You end up canceling out yourself by trying to defend someone who doesn't need you to defend them, you
Yeah.
know um oftentimes just be quiet. You don't gotta say anything.
Just
That's
shut the
really what
fuck
it
up,
is.
white
just
woman.
just be quiet, and but if like, for example, if there's another Latinx creator out there who is saying like, oh, but I really didn't like this book because it felt like this, because it felt like that. Okay, you could say that you didn't like a book. Just because it's POC author doesn't mean that you're forced to like it.
Yeah, I think that's also another issue, which I feel like anytime this is universal, not just for like any reviewer, but it's whenever like you're reviewing, like even if you're a POC, I've seen POC creators get demolished because they didn't like an author from a different a like
Right.
yeah, a different race. Like I saw this I forgot. I think I don't remember. It was a black creator and he was talking about a book and I think it was an Asian author and he was like, "I didn't particularly like this book." And then he's like, "But if you try to come at me in the comments saying I didn't like this because the author and because it's Asian, that is not true. I don't like this because X, Y, and Z. I just didn't get the plot and all of this." But you still see people come in the comments where it's like it's this idea that like even if it is a book written by a POC author, it doesn't mean it's always good.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's
establishing the
something.
reasons why it's not a good book and separating that from the fact that they are a POC author.
Yeah, like I'm gonna bring it up really quickly. So we have Jade Fire Gold circulating
Oh
right
yeah,
now,
I saw that.
which is Chinese mythology. And a lot of people were coming at this book because the language used in the book is not 100% Mandarin, and that other things are not um I want to say accurate Chinese mythology. But then you also have to, you guys got to remember, this is a fantasy world that is inspired by Chinese mythology. It is
It's not.
not accurate Chinese mythology. If you want to look that up, then yeah, you can go look up historical fiction, you can go look up mythology. But this is a fantasy novel set in a brand new world with heavy, heavy influence on Eastern culture, Asian culture, So it's not, and the author was saying this, that, you can't like 100% translate it because it's not real words. I'm making up this language, I'm making up this world influenced by this culture. It's not, and people were coming at it and saying that's not accurate and all of these things, but it's very different. It's a fantasy book,
I
you
mean, you
know?
can say that for like any like book based off of like Hades and Persephone. Like like Katie Robert,
Any.
Neon Gods is a literal like Greek mythology and it still is heavily inspired. It does not follow exactly Hades and Persephone's
Yeah.
story. Like
And yet you have people coming at it because it
it's not
used,
accurate.
yeah, and because it's not a European retelling,
And it's not like they're not actual gods.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert.
It's
Well, I
kind of
guess
like that thing of like that a little double standard right there, where it's just kind of like, guys, guys.
it's always like I feel like some POC authors, when they write about their books, are held to such a higher standard than white authors when it comes
Mhm.
to, like it's like because they're a
because
POC author, they're
because it's
expected.
new, because
Yeah.
it's new, and because it's different, and people
Yeah.
aren't used to it, and people don't know how to deal with it, and people don't know what they're expecting when they're jumping into it, whether the POC author is doing the same thing as a white author. They're doing the same thing, they're creating their own world, they're inspired by different types of mythology, they're inspired by different types of lore, but because it's not European based lore, it's unfamiliar to us because fantasy using other cultures hasn't been done often,
I think a
to where
good
people don't know what they're expecting, and then also being like, well, that's not accurate, and it's not accurate to one standard, but it's accurate to what I decided to make up.
I think a Chloe Gong, These Violent Delights is a very good example where it's set in Shanghai. It is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and yet there's still like it's influenced and it's set in like the culture, but it's still like there are newer elements brought into it. But I guess it's not that close because it's like it's definitely like heavily like set in Shanghai kind of thing and about the
Yes.
time and still, but there's still like elements where you're like, oh, it's inspired by like a European centered, not
Retelling.
retelling. I think I could say retelling. Yeah. But it's just, it's like, it gets so annoying because it's like, I feel it's a lot of white people who like try to white knight this and like come for POC authors and they're like, oh, I'm speaking for this community. I'm like,
No, you're not.
if
Shut
I
up.
go to your profile picture and I see you're a white person talking about POC issues, I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen to you. Unless you have a POC person like backing you up and like, hey, here, this is a good like reference.
Hmm. And then, like, on top of that, let's say that the POC book gets through all of that, right? But then we go back to like the thing of like it having to be an actual good book. Like a
Yeah,
POC's job is not, just making sure that the representation of their own
there.
culture is there, but it's also writing a good book. Like you have all of these other books that are just written and they're just complete trash
Yeah.
to some people, to some people.
Yeah.
To other people they
Yeah.
might be great, but to
Yeah.
some people it's just like, no, this is not it. And that's, that's up for debate, it's up for opinion. So if you read You Had Me At Hola and you just didn't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But if you specifically did not like it
The stereotypes, quote unquote.
because the stereotypes, because of like how it was written, because of like all of the cultural influences that this
Yeah.
book has literally on every page.
But like it's she's writing about her own culture. She's writing about like
It's
going back. It's her experience, her life experience. Like
it's
if that makes
it's
you uncomfortable,
literally it's
that's
literally like walking in the life. It's kind of like that sense of like, yeah, she's out there, she's doing her things, but like the way her mind works and the way that she talks and the way that she like holds herself and the way that she has to represent herself as a woman, wanting to make moves, wanting to, make hefa moves, she's doing all of these things. Number one, she is Boriqueña, you know, that carries a load on who a person is. It's not everything that defines her, but it is a big load on it. And on number one, that is like a thing. But then she carries herself and she does all of these other things. And then, it just becomes a staple for her, right?
yeah.
And so we have her going along this journey, trying to make it happen with this book, and then also battling like this romance and all of these things. But
Which is
it's
I which is why I enjoyed this book and like diversifying. This is why I think like diversifying your shelves when it comes to having not just Black authors, but Asian authors as well, and within the Asian subcategory, like all like Southeast Asian authors, and stuff like that. I think it's so important to diversify because if you're not willing to experience another person's like perspective on their culture and stuff from another from like with reading and stuff, because we've had, I mean, a year ago there was this big controversy about a book talk creator who said they could not relate to characters because X, Y, and Z. And it's like, if you can't do that, you need to self-reflect and stuff. And it's like, I don't know about y'all, but like me, I'm a bland chicken white person. I have no seasoning in my, I mean, I'm Turkish, but that's still like, I'm white as fuck. But like, I find it so interesting to read and like read stories heavily influenced by other cultures
mm,
because I mean I don't have a very heavy sense of culture, if you know what I mean. Like I'm not religious. I don't have like a sense of like community, and it's fun to read about that and to like see the dynamics in You Had Me At Hola and to see the relationships that people have with their cousins and how the three of the primas of power are like badass bitches. I can't wait to read a lot like Adios. I have it so we can read it. I have the audiobook, Grace.
okay,
But I
okay.
think it's so important for especially white readers to read from other perspectives and
And then like going away from like, like the culture and everything. Yeah, because this book does have it and it is a
yeah.
lot of it, you know. And then like stepping away from that, like what do we see beyond that? Because like again, we read this book, we enjoyed it for
Yeah.
the storyline. We
Yeah.
enjoyed all of those things in it. I personally enjoyed it because I felt seen. I felt like this was me going out there. I felt like this was me walking in her shoes, walking in Jasmine's shoes and doing all of these things. And I could connect with that because like where I grew up, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, you know. I grew up where it was rare to see white people normally.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say it like that, but it was kind of like that, to the point where like majority of the people that I would see was mostly Black people, mostly Hispanic people, you know. That was what it is. And then when I would see Hispanic people, it wouldn't just be Hispanic people, it would be like a bunch of different people. It would be a bunch of different countries from Central America, depending on where I was, you know. And then I also went to high school in Koreatown, and then I got a whole bunch of, you know, other cultures. And for me growing up and just not I hate to say it like that, but this is the only way that for it to kind of come across, for me not to differentiate between different ethnicities. Well, I could. That's not a good way to say it either.
I know. I think
For me to look at people and then
you don't first
stop
yeah,
because
you
I see
don't.
ethnicity.
Yeah, you don't have that where it's like it's ethnicity isn't the first thing that comes to your mind when you see a person.
Yeah,
That's what you're
thank
trying
you.
to say.
That's what it is.
That's what I would feel. It's like it's there are people who live like that. Like it took a while for me to get out of that mindset where I grew up in a very I mean, I didn't grow up in Dallas. I didn't grow up in a very white community. I had a lot of white neighbors, but like my school, we still like my two best friends. I hate to pull that trope. I hate to pull the trope, but I had
Oh, great,
two
Maggie.
Black best friends, Anna and Chelsea, who I still talk to. Well, Anna, no, but Chelsea, I love that bitch. I love you, Chelsea. She probably will never hear this. But like I've had that thing, but I went to Colorado and I had two Black kids in my whole school. I go to Kansas
It's
City, two Black kids in my whole
Oh
school.
my gosh. It's like something I honestly, when I go somewhere else and feel that it, because it's a different atmosphere. You feel
It's
it.
different, yeah.
When I
You feel the
did the
privilege.
whole
You
yeah,
smell you walk down the hall and you
I just
smell
like
privilege.
it makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
It just like it just I just feel it. It's very, very weird.
Yeah.
But then where I went to school, where I grew up, you know, we have all of these different types of people. I am Mexican and Nicaragüense.
Mhm.
Nicaragüense is Nicaragua, which is next to El Salvador. And let me tell you, when I went to high school, I went to high school in Koreatown, and a bunch of Koreans. We have a few Mongolians there as well. Well, I love them. I love you guys. And you know, it was yeah, it's in the middle of Koreatown, but you get a whole bunch of Koreans and you get a lot of Central Americans. And Central America is very different, but it's the same and different at the same time. And it's Central America is very different from Mexico. And it's a huge thing between Mexico and Central America. And Mexico, they see themselves as, or other people see Mexico as a little bit whiter,
Mhm.
and Central America as just more Latino.
Mhm.
And me, that I'm in both, you know, it's kind of
That's
like, you
very
know,
interesting because I've never heard like
oh,
Mexicans being referred
oh,
to as like too white. I've heard like I've never heard
mm,
that.
oh, babe,
Wow, I'm getting a
babe,
history lesson right
babe,
now.
babe. It's a huge thing, you know, and
Mhm.
it's kind of how any POC culture is. The lighter you are,
Or
the more,
I
you know,
mean,
it's a lot of colorism. It's
yeah,
a definitely
yeah.
rooted. I had friends who grew up who were Oaxacan, which is like Mexico, but it's like, you know, a little more indigenous.
Mhm.
Um, and Mexicans also view Oaxaca as like a different type of like you're from Oaxaca. It's
I
a thing, and
yeah.
it's so subtle. It's within the community, and you know we get it a bunch from each other. We get it a
Mhm.
bunch from each other, and then outside of it, we get it too.
Duke actually, I just read the arc for it. It's coming out in December. Duke actually by Jenny Holiday. The main character is Mix. And she talks about how like with her white colleagues, she's considered as too Hispanic. And then to her Hispanic family, she's considered too white because her dad is British, I think. And so she talks about like she talks to her love interest. She talks about that how this she feels so torn between the two communities, and it was very interesting to read about. And it's like I have never experienced that, so it's a necessity, I feel like, to read about that in books and to understand that. It's like I can never empathize, or I can empathize, but I could never relate to it, if you know what I mean. Like
it's like a huge thing. I mean, I don't hate, but then I'm also sorry because like, you know, we're turning this into like, you know, a cultural discussion, but
but
it's for people to understand that, you know, there's a lot that goes on within the Hispanic community, within the Latinx community. You know, we got a lot of problems. We got a lot of
I mean,
problems,
every
and it's
community has clash within the community.
every community has that. And you know, like, you know, what I was saying about like how different countries in Latino America see each other. They
Yeah,
see each other very, very different. And
yeah.
they see each other kind of like with disdain a bit, or they see each other like, oh, that we're the same. It's very, very different. And you know, me, where I grew up, and I was able to like, you know, experience everybody. From my teacher, my English teacher, shout out Mr. Torres, I miss you, you were awesome. My teacher did a great job with one of these discussions that we had about America, and how, you know, somebody explained it that we were like um all thrown together in a huge melting pot, where everybody would, all of their cultures, all the people that would come to America, you know, immigrants and people who were born here, or people who like, you know, whatever. We're all dumped into this pot, and it's a melting pot. So we're all jumping in and become this slush of something new. And he said, we are not, I don't see America as a melting pot. I see America more like a stir fry.
Yeah. I
And
think
all of
we've
us
talked
were
about this
like,
before.
yes, I've
I
mentioned this
think we've
before.
talked about this on the podcast. Okay.
And he
I was
was
like,
like,
who told me this before?
me, you know, I'm taking this from him. Um,
Stir fry. Sorry, I interrupted.
no, you're good.
I hate being that like the white woman who interrupts all the. I've gotten that comment before, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I just need to speak my mind real quick. I've had that where like I was talking with Eamon on a live, and we were both like interjecting into the conversation, and then when somebody said stop,
We were,
oh,
yeah, I
that was
remember. Yeah.
do you remember
And
that?
I saw people commenting, and I was just like, hold up, shut up. We're all talking the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyways,
So
okay,
I think I've interrupted.
so yeah, we're like a stir fry, in the sense that when in a stir fry, all the ingredients are added into the plate, and they are still distinguishable as their own piece, as their own
And have their own like
item, but they
files.
still come together to make one plate. We are still differentiated by what we are, but we are all essentially Americans, you know? And it doesn't take away from what America is, but it's adding something to it. And I always bring that up because like people seem to forget that, you know, we're different, yet we're all there.
Fundamental, like
We're different.
we're different, but like we're all the same because
We're
we're
all the same.
human, and like there's psychology 101. Like
We're all different, but
we all have the same human tendencies and
mhm.
all that stuff.
All of us still log into our Netflix and
Yeah.
play. Are we still watching?
We all
Yes,
still like
we
fairy
all
porn.
we all do, you know.
Some of you don't like to admit it.
Somebody doesn't, but it is what it is. And I feel like people need to read books like this that are just very different but very similar, because number one, we're reading about Jasmine, and in her, like, Jasmine is playing a part, right, in a novella. Number one, a novella is Hispanic through and through, is Latinx through and through, and that's what it is. And we're getting through their stories, and we're getting to see their experience, like, in Hollywood industry. But then you could read another rom-com about a white girl going through this experience, and it's very different and yet still similar.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting how she wasn't fluent in Spanish, but yet she still like was on, like, I thought that was a very interesting thing where it's like people automatically assume that if you're part of a certain race, like you're expected to know a certain language and stuff. And I think this is a very interesting perspective where it's like she doesn't know, like she knows Spanish and she can speak it and stuff, but she's not fluent. She still had to, like, even Ashton pointed that out, where like she's processing it, and like you saw her process of going through and like saying it out and stuff.
She's a term we like to use. She is a Nosabo child. A Nosabo.
I'm like, I'm waiting for you to explain it because I've never heard that.
I'm trying not to laugh as I say. Is a term. Nosabo means I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not Nosabo. It's no sé. I mean,
No
I don't
sé.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nosabo is something that a child would use when someone is talking to them in Spanish, and all they know how to say is Nosabo, and they're also using the wrong tenses and the wrong
conjugation.
Yeah, and so a Nosabo kid.
Charts.
Hey, there you go. A Nosabo kid is basically like a kid who grew up and who is Hispanic but doesn't know how to speak Spanish. My little brother Aaron is a Nosabo. My brother Jacob is a Nosabo. I am too. And
wait. I don't know.
I am too. I am a Nosabo.
Always like presented that you knew a lot more.
Oh yeah, I do, but I'm still
you're not fluent.
If you threw me back in Nicaragua, I'd struggle for a little bit, but I know what everybody was talking about. It's a difference because there's like Nosabos that know what is being said and those who don't. And it's different because like Spanish is my first language. It is not my primary language. That's a difference too that people need to understand. First language is the language that you grew up with, that's the first language you ever learned. My first language ever learning was Spanish, but then I went to elementary school and they only speak English. And both of my parents are, yes, they are first generation, but they are fluent English speaking. My dad went to USC, has a whole degree in English literature, right?
Yeah.
He speaks English better than a bunch of people. So growing up, we spoke English. Yeah, because that's what it was. Did we lose Spanish? I mean, a little bit, but it's still there.
I definitely feel like when she was talking about how like she has to like process. So I grew up learning Russian, and now I am kind of like, I know a lot. Like I can present myself that I know a lot of Russian, but it's like I can understand Russian a lot.
Oh
like,
yeah,
I can sit in and listen and fully like understand what is happening and stuff. You make me try to say it. I'm gonna be sounding like
yep. That's me. Because my grandma will talk to me and then she'll forget, and she'll be talking to my brother and she'll struggle through English. She speaks English, but she'll struggle through it. And then I'll jump in and then I'll be like, ¿Qué necesitas? And then like she'll tell me, and then I'll tell Jacob. And then, then she'll start talking to me in English. And I'm like, yeah. I speak a Spanish.
The way you just said that, I'm sorry.
And she'll be like, but see. And then she'll go on and then say whatever it is that she was saying, and it's kind of that funny thing that we have to kind of go through, but it's like you lose a little bit in there, and we saw that with Ashton and
Yeah.
Jasmine, and we see them struggling, but
Yeah.
it's I thought it was so cute that he was like, don't worry, it's okay, I'll teach you, we'll practice. And I was like, give me one.
I loved. Okay, Ashton was a DILF. I love how I like texted you and I was like, Ashton is a DILF. Like
Oh
Ashton,
yeah, I love Ashton.
the
He gives me
cover of
anxiety, but
Ashton. Oh,
I found myself relating a lot more to Ashton than I did to Jasmine.
I feel the same. I feel like
It's the
anxiety.
anxiety.
It's the mental illness in
It's
it.
the mental illness. That's what we
I
related
mean,
to.
Jasmine struggles too, but it's just like
She does. It's not the same though. Anxiety brings us all together. But I did really like him. I like the way that he talked, and like I like the way that he carried himself also.
Okay, like
I mean, he fumbled the ball a couple times, but
the
that
space scene,
first scene,
not even
and not
and
even like going in,
not even not going in, literally like
and the
a
communication.
humpback whale. Humping, I guess I could say, because
Yeah.
this is rated not for kids and explicit. I've moved the podcast to explicit because we've done so much about sex.
Look, this man got off by just touching her fucking shit.
Like the power Jasmine holds over him.
My gosh. And like the communication, dude, the communication.
I
The fact
love
that they talked about it, and then like the consent, and like this, I won't have like penetration, and like she was like, okay. And the fact that he said that.
Yes, I think, and that's how we see where it's these little like, and I also the fact that like Ashton like mm,
He's something. I just
he is.
love him. He's awesome. And he's so sexy.
And
And
Victor, who he played, was also like that confident. Like Ashton as a person is not very like a very self-conscious but him as like Victor and like
Victor,
Jasmine
oh my god.
noticed like she was like when she was playing Carmen, she was talking about how like
He like
flirty
took
he was, and like
control.
I love the trope of like
He
them
was.
playing a character and like being very confident and stuff. I love
He
that
was so
shit.
good. And the fact that like Jasmine related more to Victor because of how like he carried him. I mean, yeah, to Victor, because like Victor is more confident and more like knows what he wants and is trying to go for it.
Yeah.
And Ashton is more like Carmen, more like a little more
Yeah.
timid, unsure, and like, but he's very affectionate and all of these things. And then the fact that they're playing these on-screen characters of like second chance romance, I was like, we get 2 in 1.
Yeah.
It was so good. And like, by the way, like when I was reading this book, like, I felt like I was watching it, and
I loved
it felt like a novela. It felt like,
I mean, it was so dramatic.
It was so dramatic. It was so dramatic,
And like,
but novellas have to be.
but
We
yeah,
have to
that's
have
how.
those.
If you've ever
We have
watched
to
like a Turkish novella, or like,
we have to have those, Teresa moments where like gasps in Spanish.
or
It's
like,
those
where they
things.
open the door and they're like, they open the door and they come in, and,
And it's just like, and there always has to be like some evil plot in there, and like resurrection. It's a thing. But going back to it, it's just like when I was reading this book, I kept picturing Jane the Virgin. If you don't watch novellas, watch Jane the Virgin, and basically kind of like the feel of a novela, because it's dramatic too.
It's dramatic as fuck.
But it's like fun and lighthearted, and that's what I felt like. I felt if you like Jane the Virgin, you will love You Had Me At Hola.
Yeah.
because it's literally the feelings there, the Latinx families, the twists and turns, and like, we have all of these things happening, and the kid, and it felt like it. And at the beginning, I kept picturing Ashton like Rogelio. Rogelio is Jane's dad. And I had to like stop myself from picturing him like that, because I was just like, no, he needs to be a little bit younger, a little more handsome. And I was just like, hold up, Rogelio is handsome.
Well, Ashton's 40. Like, Ashton's like, he talks about
But
he's
Rogelio is older.
Oh, he's like 60?
No, I want to say like 50.
50 is that bad?
Yeah, but
I mean, Johnny Depp
considering,
is like 60.
Considering my dad's 50, I can't be simping over a man that, first of all, is Hispanic. And like, I don't know, it just felt a little too close. A little bit. Would I actually simp for a man that age and Hispanic? I don't think so.
If he was
too close
rich,
to my dad.
If he was rich.
Look, I got issues, okay? But not that much.
I have to tell you after the podcast something that happened with Tish.
Not that much, okay? Not that much.
But I think this is a good wrapping up point. In the next part of the episode, we will be having Alexis Daria, who is the author of the book we have been talking about, You Had Me At Hola. We will be talking to her for a while, and it was really great. I'm so excited for y'all to listen. It was really insightful on like, number one, like the writing process and things like that. But just kind of like, what it felt like. We do get a little emotional sometimes, me mostly, because how I am. But it was like a really meaningful experience. I loved this book so much. I love What the Hex, as you will hear in the next clip. And this was the first time that I read a book where I felt like I didn't have to change in order to be that character. Yeah.
And it's very, very important. And it's fine if people didn't like the book, and it's fine if like it wasn't for you. That's totally fine. But for me, this was it. I felt seen, and that's really something that any writer wants from their reader, and that's what readers are looking for. And you're gonna have to do your work, to go look for a book that shows who you are within the pages. And I feel like the more that we continue to do that, the more that we get to uplift other POC authors and get to have them on platforms like ours and even bigger platforms, and do our part as readers and consumers to help uplift their voices, because they need it,
Yes, and thank you to all of our listeners for helping us get to this point where we can interview authors like Alexis. It was a process. I've never done this way of getting a guest, so it was a very interesting process and a learning experience for me as the manager. But I'm so excited for y'all to listen to this next part of the episode, and enjoy,
you guys. Hey guys, welcome back. We are now starting the interview portion of our episode, and we have our very special guest. So we have Alexis Daria, the author of You Had Me At Hola and A Lot Like Adios, and my personal favorite, the Audible What the Hex. Welcome, Alexis. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. When I tell you, when Grace got the Audible, of What the Hex, and she's texted me, she's like, you have to read this. You have to listen to it. You have to. She's like, Maggie, it's so amazing. And she would not stop talking about What the Hex. It was like weeks. It was weeks. And she would mention it on the podcast too. And she's like, guys, y'all gotta listen to What the Hex. And she's obsessed with you. I will tell you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
It was definitely a fun listen. I find myself wanting to re-listen to it all the time, especially because it's just a short. It's right. Especially for the time right now. We need that like witchy family vibe.
it's like spooky season, but also Miami.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah, so kind of to get started, do you want to give us like a general overview of who you are for our listeners who have not heard of you before, or for those who have and want to hear more about you?
Sure. My name is Alexis Daria, and I am a romance author living in New York City. Hopefully, we're not going to have too many of the New York City sounds. I can hear a motorcycle out there already, but fingers crossed. As you said, I'm the author of the Primas of Power series, starting with You Had Me At Hola, A Lot Like Adios, just came out this past September. And yeah, I've got some other books out there too, but those are kind of the big ones right now.
Yes, I listened to You Had Me At Hola, and when I tell you I could not put it down. Like it was just the writing style. I like have to give you kudos because it was so having the scenes between the chapters too really helped make it like a fast-paced book to read, which was really great. We kind of talked about it before in the beginning segment of the book, but I really have to say you did a really good job with
Oh, thank you.
writing. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
That was actually like the first time I ever like read a book where it had them acting out and the scenes written out. And I thought it was really good because like you could see the transition, but then also see like the actors, what Carmen's actually feeling during those scenes, even though like she's acting, but you
Even though
still
it's really
see it.
Jasmine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there. And then it just made it all come together. And I say this about any book that I love, but like I am waiting for somebody to pick up the Primas of Power to make it a TV show, because I mean it's basically written there for them. It just needs to be made.
I'm hoping,
Manifest.
as an author, I think, well, I mean, I guess I can't speak for other people, but like, I always feel like that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
To see your work brought to life in that way. So
I
hopefully that.
yeah, I think that's like I always feel like little kids is always like I want to be an author and then I want to have a TV show based off of my story and like I feel like that's like an ultimate dream too for authors is like oh to get that recognition of like oh I can put words onto paper but I can put the words into a screen too. So it's definitely I definitely would like to see it on screen as well.
Yeah, and writing those scenes was it was a big part of the book because when I first started writing it, I was like, okay, so they're going to be like acting, at these parts, and I'll just like kind of like gloss over that. And then I was like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, I don't know what the show that they're on is like. I don't know what's happening on these episodes. So I had to figure out all of that first. And then I said, well, how am I going to show it? Am I just going to, originally I thought I would just write maybe script, maybe I would just show them kind of, just maybe saying a few lines and then cut and like that kind of stuff. And then I was like, oh no, wait, I just have to just show the scene and show it in their POV, but in character. So they are Carmen and Victor in those moments. And it also served a purpose for the romance because Ashton and Jasmine are really trying to stay away from each other, but they can't because they have to be on set, like getting very close. So it at least gave us those moments when they weren't doing that on their own. And you got to see like how they felt about it.
Oh yeah. Those scenes, when I was reading them, I was always looking forward to looking for them.
Oh, good.
Because I'm just like, to like plan that out, it's like a crucial part. Like it was integral to like the story. It was integral to the whole plot line. So like you said, you had to kind of like plan it out later. So would you say your writing style, are you more of like a plotter, or do you kind of start off with who you want to, like your characters first, and then like the story develops on its own? Or do you know those main scenes along the way that you want to hit and then kind of fill in the gaps? Like what type of writer are you?
I am a major plotter. I need to know my characters as well as I possibly can before I start writing. And I need a sense of the entire story. Like scene by scene breakdown, even if what's happening in that scene is kind of vague. Like for What the Hex, I had some where it was like they go to the bachelor party and try to exorcise the demon, like, and then I got to that point and I was like, I don't want to research exorcisms, but I have to now because I didn't put it in my outline.
Right.
And I don't know how you do one. So that there's still, some room for, and it does of course change sometimes while I'm writing. I had to re-outline at least a quarter of A Lot Like Adios as I was writing it. Where I just kind of said, okay, this thing changed and I'm going to leave it that way, but now I have to look at my outline and see if I have to move these things around or take out something I planned and put in something else. So, and I do a lot of character work. So I'll write backstory scenes. I've got all these backstory scenes of Gabe and Michelle from when they're like, little kids to high school students to Gabe breaking up with his girlfriend who gets mentioned like 1 or 2 times.
I love that,
I have
though.
That scene right now.
That's great though, because like I'm pretty sure like those scenes, those like, even though you don't end up using them, they kind of help you figure out how the character would react in certain scenes, what they would say, more of like what their personality is and what they're planning on doing with whatever situation comes across. Like, I think that's like really important. I too am a plotter. I like knowing every single detail before I write anything out. And like with What the Hex, like you had all of this brujeria, but it felt so familiar. And I remember you said like on your Instagram live that you had to make it seem like it was already there and you're just kind of stepping into the magical world where it's very familiar. You don't have to like start all over because it was a shorter story, it was a novella, but it just felt like it could exist all on its own and you're just seeing like the little window into it. So I think that process is like amazing and you can see that it works because so far, like all of the stories that I've read, I feel like every character, every plot line is so strong on its own that is just like I'm just popping by, but they're existing completely on their own, being and living, and I'm just here to say hi and see this one segment of their life. So I really enjoy that about your writing style, for sure.
Oh, thank you so much. It's and for me that's where the planning really comes in, because these characters are people before page 1. And I need to know who they are before I start on page 1. And I will say for the record, with What the Hex, I feel like a lot of people are sad that it's so short. But I was only hired to write 20,000 words.
Yeah.
And I gave you 22 because we put in some extra world building and some extra romance and emotion.
I took every single word and I tried to go very slowly with it because I knew it was a very short audible. It was like maybe like 2 hours and a half, I think. And
2 hours and 45 minutes, somewhere around there, but not even 3 hours.
Not even 3 hours. And when I finished, like everything, it was a full story, but I was just like, I want to know more about this family. I need to know about the other cousins and like the rest of their lives. I need to know about the uncle. I want to see more of them because each character was just like, I love them so much. You always say that it's like Adam's family and the Kardashians. And I'm just like, that is such an accurate description of them, because they're just like, you just can't stop watching. You want to keep watching them. You want to keep knowing more about them. And so, but I did hear that you are planning to try to push this out to make it an actual printed novella.
I am at least going to do an ebook. Print is a little harder to do something that's that short.
Yeah.
But my thought is, if I write more of them, I can then bundle them and do a printed version.
I would definitely be purchasing that in every edition that it comes in. Just putting that out there now.
When I tell you Grace is obsessed, like Grace is obsessed with what the heck. It's
A little bit.
she's definitely a witchy vibe girl, so it's
I
great.
mean, me too.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
So I was gonna ask, so I can definitely tell is like, what is your favorite process in, or what is your favorite part of the writing process? Because you talked a lot about planning, but like, do you just like really hate planning and love the writing part, or do you like the final like version and doing copy edits, or what is like your favorite part of it?
So my favorite part is actually revisions, because, when I'm writing the book, so I do all of this planning, which can be a little like stressful sometimes, because I'll get to a point and I'm like, who are you? Tell me who you are. And it's like you're trying to figure out who this person is and like build a complete person, but also like, I only have what I have here to go with. So I'm like, do they have that? No, that doesn't feel right for them. Like, does she want to be a pastry chef? Does she want to, quit her job? Like whatever she wants. So that part, it is a lot of work. And then I draft the book very, very quickly, like in a fiery blaze of glory, really as quickly as I can, because by that point I'm down to the wire and I have to turn it in.
Right.
And I'm like, I just got to get the words down. I can fix them later. And that fix it later part is where I remember, because the first draft feels like chiseling every word into stone. It's like, it just feels so hard won. And then when I get to revisions, I'm like, oh, this manuscript is actually made out of Play-Doh. And I can just like change anything. And it's very malleable. And that for me, that's where the magic happens.
Oh, okay. And I know I get this advice like from any author, anyone who's writing. It's like always finish the first draft. Just get it in, get it down, and then the editing process, you can always clean it up and add things into it, but it's just that first draft, getting over that hill and completing that part. It's like the hardest part, because I want everything to be perfect. I want it to make sense and I want it to be all written right. And so I'll find myself like writing something and then like wanting to go back and reread it to see, does this make sense? And I have to stop myself and just be like, no, just keep going, just try to get through with it, because it definitely like holds a lot of people back. But that editing process,
I think you have to know yourself too.
Yeah.
For me, the quest for perfection, especially in a first draft, is going to stop me. I won't ever get anything done if I'm trying to do that. And that's, I think, sometimes the hardest part every time I write a new book is I have to let go of that quest for perfection every single time, again and again. But I think there are some authors who do edit as they go, and that's what works for them, because I don't know how, because it's not how I operate.
Yeah.
But I think you need to know yourself well enough and do the thing that's going to get you through, whether that's editing as you go, or whether it's just blurting out a first draft, whether it's plotting, or whether it's pantsing, or being a discovery writer, whatever it is that's going to get you there, then that's what you do.
Yeah, Grace and Grace and I have mentioned this on every single episode with an author. We're writing a book and we're heavy plotters, and we've literally been stuck because like I feel like I need to edit as I go, because that's just how my brain processes, but I think I need to like let it go and just be like, just put as much like all my words out there, and then I can like go back and change it, because I always like think of something and I'm like, oh crap, I want this in there, and it's like, well, now I have to write it immediately because I'm going to forget about it later. So it's definitely like going to be interesting as a writing process.
Write it down, certainly, because some people are like, oh, if it's like really important for the story, I won't forget. And I'm like, I will always forget whatever great idea I just had before falling asleep at night. So I have to write it down. So even if I have an idea for something further back in the story, I'll say, okay, that's actually a great idea. I'm going to go back, put a note to make that happen. And then I'll put a note wherever I am and say, that I'm proceeding from this point as if that thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I then only have to go and change, if it's like a big change, let's say, I only have to change however much space there is between where I make the change and where I am now.
Oh,
Got it. Yeah.
yeah.
It's definitely a tough part. I am a heavy world builder, and so I want to know how things work and like the magic system and making sure that it makes sense, and it's not going to be like where a reader's coming across it and then being like, that doesn't make sense, like how does that magic system work, or things like that. I want it to make sense because I want the reader to enjoy the world as much as possible and feel like they're being put into this book and they're going along with the characters. So I always want to make it seem, I focus a little bit too much on that, and I feel like you said, you have to know what kind of writer you are and what works for you. But I always have those like 1 a.m. thoughts that just like pop into my brain, and I have to open up my notes pad on my phone and type away, and just then I come at it in the morning. It's barely makes sense, but it's something there, and then we'll fix it. We'll come back to it. We'll fix it later, but it's there. So
I love the notes app on my phone for that reason.
I use voice memos because I think of scenes a lot in my head, because that's how I visualize, like when I'm writing, I visualize like a movie playing in my head, and so I write like how it is a movie. So I worked at Barnes Noble, so like I remember one like during a
Me
break.
too.
Oh my gosh, I love it was fun for a while, and then the customers, you're like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore.
You know what? Retail is just hard.
Oh my gosh, retail is so
general.
hard. Hopefully gonna get a job back here where I go to university at, but kind of that, like I love the voice memos because you just talk and you play the scene out in your head and you just say it, and then I just go back and I just type it out as I listen to it, and then I'm like, why did I come up with this? Sometimes I'm like this doesn't really make sense, but okay, we're just gonna type it down. But you are a romance author, so what do you think is like the key to writing a believable slash relatable romance?
I think it comes down to the characters. We have all read and watched romances that have the most outlandish situations. And you're just like, all right, I'm along for the ride. I'll go with it. But as long as the character emotions ring true, we'll follow along. So you really just want to focus on the growth arcs of your love interests, regardless of whatever kind of situation they're in.
yeah, I definitely liked your story in You Had Me At Hola with Ashton dealing with like his things and his trauma, and trying to protect his kid, and then how that transferred into his relationship with Jasmine, and how that was kind of like a tipping point for them on whether their relationship would thrive afterward. And I really liked how there are certain romances that I'll read where their character arcs have nothing to do with each other, but that they'll end up coming together and working through it like an actual partnership, like an actual relationship. And I feel like those are the couples that like you really root for, because you see them working together as a unit. And I feel like that helps create like this, readers, we're taking in these romances and we're trying to learn from it. We're learning from what we read, and to create like healthy relationships that a reader can walk away with is that sense of like equality in a relationship, and that we can work together, we can be a team. Yes, this is your load that you have to carry, but you don't have to be alone. Like we can share this and I'm here for it. Whereas other romances where they solve their problems but not working together, not communicating, it's really unsatisfying because it doesn't feel like there is any connection between the two characters. And I feel like that's something that can tell the difference between a really good romance and one that they may have had a happily ever for now, but you don't see the couple lasting after the last page of the book. Yeah,
that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I think what is more romantic than you know, the people in the, you know, the love interests learning to grow into better people together or from each other. You know, they're helping each other be their best selves. So you want to see them doing that together on the page. And, you know, even though their arcs may be different, even though their journeys might be a little different, like you want those moments of connection.
Yeah. And I definitely feel like it makes the reader feel like this is something that is special. And it's not something that everyone will get, but it's something that we strive for. Like, you know, readers will always be like, oh, yes, that's my book boyfriend. I totally wish that he would do that for me. But it's also like how the main character, how they deal with the love interest as well, like how they open themselves up and how they allow themselves to grow with that person as well. It's not like, oh yeah, that person does everything for me, but then you're very unevenly yoked. But the really good ones are the ones where they both have something to work on and they both help each other. Whether it's not like, oh, it's not I'll fix it for you. It's more like we can work through it together. And I feel like those are the really good ones.
Yeah, I prefer the ones where, you know, all of the main characters, however many of them there are, have something that they're working on. They don't all have to be the same in terms of magnitude, but you know, especially because I do tend to write more in dual POV. So,
which I love. I love. Thank you.
So, you know, then you do want both of them to be working on something together. And the times where I don't write dual POV, it's usually because it's a short story or a novella.
Yeah, I was waiting for the second POV and what the heck, and I was just like, it's a short story. I have to relax. I can't have everything.
It also is definitely more Kat's journey because Kat, you know, in terms of the romance, Kat is the one who's like, what? He's my nemesis. And he's like, I love you.
Which is like the best. I love that. And I love that you've mentioned this before on other platforms, how like, because it was a novella, a way to kind of like write novellas is that you have the love interest they know each other before the book even starts, so that way it's easier to kind of like jump into the actual romance of it. And so I feel like that was like the first childhood rivals to lovers that I had read, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is something I did not know I needed. And it was just the banter, the tension between them. It felt like I was watching every second of their day together, and I knew most of their life together, and I could see it play out of them going to school and, you know, everything else happening and how their romance developed, because they had those little moments along the storyline that hint to, we know each other from before. And so that romance, that beginning part of the romance was already like cut out, so you can get to like the meat and potatoes of their story. And I thought that was like really interesting. And sorry, I just heard my doorbell ring, but I'll let my dad get that.
I didn't hear it, so you're good.
Okay, we're fine. But I wanted to ask, since we're kind of hopping onto what the hex, you said that you kind of you're hoping to continue the novellas. Do you plan on hoping, well, if it's a possibility, we're saying if, more like when, but if you do end up doing these stories, do you end up wanting to focus on other family members, or kind of continuing with Kat and like how her life continues after What the Hex?
Well, because I'm a big romance reader too, I always think of romance series as like each thing focuses on a different couple, right? That couple got their HEA or their HFN, and now we go on to like the next one in the group. So I do have a couple of ideas for a couple of Cat sisters. It's just the logistics piece, you know. whether I sell more of them and timing and all of that stuff. So I love this series. I came up with the idea for it 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. This is why you got to write things down. I jotted it down in Google Drive, and we had an opportunity to sell something. And my agent was like, all right, what do you have sitting around? And I just went and I like scrolled through, my old like ideas and works in progress. And I was like, oh yeah, I had this idea 5 years ago that I never did anything with because I didn't know what kind of format it would be. If it was going to be like YA, if it was going to be in New York, if it was going to be in California, mystery, paranormal, whatever. So I was like, okay, I can dust this off and, flesh it out based on the format that they're looking for, which was a 20,000 word rom-com written for audio. And they were down with me putting in some paranormal elements, which is like really all I want to write is paranormal. So I was so excited to finally get to do this because that's what I started out with, but it's not what was selling when I started publishing. So I started writing contemporary. So this was a real treat. And yeah, I would love to do more.
I speak for everyone, and yes, we would also want that very, very much. Just putting it out there for whoever is listening, whether it's Audible, if you're listening to, we would want more.
Post a review on Audible. That's where they see it. I know they look.
Everybody needs to be commenting on there because I know I've been talking about it a lot. You guys better go listen and go. So you talked a little bit about like how the publishing kind of like you weren't able to publish paranormal when you first started out and you had to switch over to contemporary. Can you talk a little bit more about like what advice you would give to other writers who are looking to get published? And like you said, if they have to switch over to a different genre to get published, what people are looking for right now, what kind of advice you would give them?
Okay, so there's three things. First, you want your community, right? Like what you two have and what I hope many of your readers have, where you've got your writing buddies, because this can be really hard work and hard industry. And you need those people that you can go to and be like, ugh, I had a hard day. And also like when you have a great day, you can celebrate together. So you want your community. Also work on your craft. Write a good book. Make sure that you are still learning about what goes into writing. I am still doing that. I love taking classes though. I'm listening to one on Deep POV right now by Roan Parrish. And the other one would be to just educate yourself. Know what's going on in the industry, whether you are seeking traditional publishing or indie publishing. I think it behooves all of us to know what's going on in general in both areas, and just stay appraised of the industry news, because this is a business. And people who have a business should know what's happening in their industry.
Yeah. And kind of going off of like that, being a Latinx author, can you talk a little bit about how you feel about bringing your culture and your experiences into the publishing world, specifically in this romance genre where romance is not really looked as such a great genre, and then on top of that it's more white cis romances that are being written, and you bringing your culture into that industry and into that genre?
I will just say that it's not easy and it is often frustrating, but it's important for me to do it. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to tell people who you think of as like being like a little higher than you uncomfortable things, to point it out to them because they don't know. But it's worth it. And for me, I'm writing the books that I wish that I had had when I was a teenager and, when I was younger. I loved reading genre fiction and I just wasn't finding these characters there. So I'm trying to write those kind of books, and it just means the world to me when readers read them and say like, I've never seen this before. I felt so seen here. And I'm like, I love that. And also here's all of these other authors that I know that you should check out too.
I don't want to get emotional, but
I know I saw Grace tearing up and I was like, oh no, here comes the waterworks.
yeah, I kind of am. I don't want to cry, but it does. I am gonna cry. It means a lot when you get to read like stories like you. And like when growing up, we people of color, we get used to like not seeing ourselves and having to imagine ourselves being there, whether it's on the screen, whether it's in books that we write, music that we listen to, and all of these things. We want to see ourselves out there and we don't. And then you stumble across something and then you do see yourself and you feel seen and you feel like that's me, and it feels like so amazing. I know I'm crying, but
Yeah,
every time I read like something of yours and like a whole bunch of other authors who are Latinx like me, it just, whether they be from different countries, it still feels like us and it feels like so important. And I want to thank you so much for that.
thank you, Grace. It's why I do this, and why you're doing this. And I was thinking about it the other day. I was like pulling out all these books on my shelf by Latinx authors so that I could like try to take some Bookstagram pictures. They did not come out well. And I was thinking about like growing up, my mom did have full shelves of Latinx authors, Puerto Rican authors, but there wasn't anything on there that for me at like 10 or 12 or 15, I was like, that's what I want to read. Like they were like more like history books or cultural studies books or things like that. We always had a copy of, when I was Puerto Rican, the Esmeralda Santiago memoir sitting there. And I will tell you, for the longest time, I was convinced that it was a picture of my mother on the cover. And that she just like wasn't telling me for some reason, but I couldn't figure out why she would be on there. But like, I was like, did she like fuck? Is this like about my mom? Like it's not. My mom just happens to look like her when they were young. But, it wasn't like, I was like reading Anne Rice and Nora Roberts and like the Babysitter's Club, things like that. And there was nothing like that on there with Latinx characters. The kind of stories that were out there were like, more kinds of like takes on West Side Story and like who is that? Or, I'm not even getting into like all the other stereotypes because we know, but
we know they're a bunch.
But that was what I wanted. I wanted there to be romance novels, mysteries, sci-fi, fantasy that featured Latinx characters and, more like not just like cis white characters. So I just feel like I have to be in the arena contributing to that as well and uplifting the other people who are doing that.
Yeah. And it's really important for like readers like all across that, because in your books it's not just Latinx characters, but it's like a whole mix. Like Latinx covers so much,
right?
And we're very, very different, and yet we're very similar. But I love that in your books we have like everyone can be put in there, even like LGBTQs sprinkled in there, but it's just so normal. Like that's what it is. It's not like looked at as like, oh, like here's this one person who's this and here's this one person who's that. It's just like we're all here, we're all normal, it just so happens that that's what it is. But I contribute more to the story than just my sexuality, than just the color of my skin, than just my culture. And I loved reading that in your books and in many other POC authors who can show like this is what life is. We're more than this one aspect of us. Like there is so much more to our stories and more to the stories that we're telling than this one thing, because like at the beginning, when we started seeing like, more people of color centered books, it's just like you would get that token character, and it's just like, oh, but there's more to that person than just that, and I love that in your stories where you have a big group of people, we have so many different types of people all across the board. And I feel like anybody who can pick up your book will be able to like enjoy that part, as well as enjoying like this way that the story is going, because it is important. Like, I mean, you guys saw, like, I got all emotional because like, it's you don't know, growing up and not being able to see yourself in the things that you're passionate about, you really have to look for it. You really have to like dig deep beyond what is pushed at you with the cis white stories, to look for something that genuinely you love. And if it's not there, then you can make it, you can direct it, you can write it, you can make a script for it, you can do it yourself. If you don't see that gap is being filled, then you can do it as somebody who also wants other people to see that for you. And it's important, whether you think maybe no one's going to look at this, maybe nobody's going to see it, but then people do look for it. People are waiting to see more of it, and it's important. So yeah, I just wanted to say that again. Thank you. I'm sorry you had to see me cry, but
No, thank you.
I cry a lot. It's the whole thing. I'm very emotional. It's yeah. Maggie, do you have a question? Because I've been talking a lot.
Well, I do think it's definitely like important, and I've noticed like recently, like I'm a white woman, yes, but like I come from like an immigrant, like my father's an immigrant, and like I'm cis passing. I mean, I'm bisexual. Like I've had other partners and stuff, and it's like I've been starting to see more books coming out recently that are like, okay, like this started to like represent me, because it's definitely the LGBTQ plus community has definitely gone through hardships as well. But I do think that like, do you think that recently we've seen, you talked about in the publishing industry, there has still been hardships when it comes to being a POC author. Have you seen though a little bit of like, because of book talk, especially with like the amount of like readers requesting like more diversity when it comes to books and stuff, have you noticed that there are changes within the publishing realm? Have you noticed that?
I think in the last few years, we have seen some changes. I would like to see those changes both continue and grow.
Yeah.
I have also noticed, okay, so when you go to a book talk table in a Barnes and Noble, right?
Oh,
We've
don't
seen
even
that
get me
they have
started.
those now, right? With a lot of the books that are getting mentioned. You will notice that there are certain voices missing from the authors who are shown on those tables.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm going to say. So algorithms, they can work one way, but they're not always working another.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely still a lot more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But it does not feel at this moment like there are ways to really advocate for that as much as there have been. So it's something that I've been thinking about and talking about with some of my fellow authors. But, I think that what you're all doing, giving a platform to authors, from different cultures and different backgrounds, is wonderful, and like one of the things that helps authors get seen, right? Because that's always the thing, we put a book out there and then we just hope that people find it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Dramatic.
a very heavy topic to talk about, but I think it's definitely like important. And I definitely think that like going forward, like I've definitely tried to like since been coming on Book Talk and stuff, like I've definitely been able to, like Nisha Sharma, I've never heard of her before, and then I followed her on Book Talk and I was like, oh my god, ma'am, I will pre-order your book immediately. Like, yes, like thank you. And I think it's so important, especially like for when it's
Oh,
oh,
your
You
sound
cut out
kind
for a
of cut out.
second.
Yeah.
there we go. My mic just went whack. I think I hit it. But I just think that it's also like important for like creators to like push for diversity, and especially like not repeating the same 3 books over and over again. It's definitely like when I worked at Barnes and Noble this summer, like I would go look at the book talk table because I would put books out there because I was the one like doing all the book talk, smut talk stuff. And I'd look at the table and I'm like, I did not put this book here. Like, why is this book here? This is like a book that like I don't want on here. Like, it has been shown thousands of times. Everybody knows where it's at already. It doesn't need to be on this table. So I would constantly be like removing books, and I'm like, and then I'd see it the next day and I'm like, why is this here? And then they're like, management put it here. And I'm like,
Okay, so first of all, I 100% understand
yeah,
that feeling of ownership that you have over a table. And
yes.
you're like, who messed with my table?
No, I did the like spicy reading ladder, and I like went back to like my old Barnes and Noble like last week, and I like saw it and I was like, who's messing with this? I was like, y'all just needed to take this down because this is not right. I was like, I looked at it, I was like, where's the diversity? Like where is it? And I'm like, and it's a white male who's doing the ladder, and I'm like, I don't think you should be doing this ladder, sweetie. But yeah, it's definitely like it's definitely everybody taking those like little steps forward. I definitely think is very important. So
Yeah.
Grace, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. Because I keep going, I'm a big magic person, and I keep talking about what the hex because it's October. Okay, guys, it's October. We love the magic. We love all of that. So can you talk a little bit about like how it was to write the magic system and make it seem like it was known and kind of like seamless to kind of step into, keeping it short for the sake of the novella, even though you added a little bit extra. But can you talk about like what was your process with kind of finding what would fit for this story?
Well, it was something that I thought about a lot going into this, because writing for audio is technically a totally different experience, right? There's certain things to think about, like not using too many dialogue tags, and starting with an action tag for the character before you have their speech, so that way you know who's speaking. Things like that, just that are just from a technical craft perspective. But then in terms of both the romance and the magic system, it is just it came out to 22,000 words. It's short. And like you mentioned earlier, when I'm writing shorter things, I try to make sure that the characters at least already know each other. Because I know that some people can manage to have people meet on page 1, or, and then still tell a satisfying story in a short amount of time. That sounds hard to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, they either know each other from childhood, they know each other from social media, they already have a crush on each other, something like that. So that way we can just kind of jump them in and it's not weird if they just immediately start kissing. So not that that would be weird, but you want it to be believable.
Yeah.
So did you hear that?
Totally fine.
Okay,
It's, yeah.
it's a truck. So when it came to the magic system, I also knew that people were going to be listening to it. So I didn't want to have like long drawn out explanations or like any kind of like confusing words that we've never heard before. So I tried to use words that we already know in terms of like the phrases and the tools and things like that, or that were like in Spanish, like the names of their deities, El Sol, things like that. And then put my own spin on it, not use an existing system. Like it wouldn't have made sense to use like a more like Celtic based thing for these people who came from the Caribbean to the Miami area.
Yeah.
You know, and who live in this area that is not really governed by the four seasons. So I put a lot of thought into what their deities would be, and then how they would talk about that and how they would do the magic parts. So every time I did do research, and then I kind of took different elements of all the research I did and kind of like mashed it all up into something that was going to work well in the story and be kind of exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely feel that, and it did feel very different from, like, you know, magic systems that, you know, most readers and most fantasy readers are like used to, where it's more of that European based magic system, and this one just felt very Latinx in a way, and very in
was trying
brujeria.
for,
Yeah, and it was
but
just like,
without making it like steeped in Catholicism either.
yeah.
So
Yeah. But it was done, like I said, so quickly and so well that it just felt like it existed on its own, and like you could pop back in hopefully soon to find out more. But I really enjoyed it, and like me, because I am like a huge fiend for like magic systems and things like that. Whenever I read a fantasy book, those are like the things that I tab of how the magic system works and how the world works with that. And so I thought it was very satisfying to do that in such a short time and just to feel known in that audible way, because like, yeah, you're listening to it. You can't like rewind to like go back and listen to it, and then you have to go back. In a book, you could just like flip a page, come back to it later, and it's there. Listening
if
to it,
someone's driving, I don't want them to have to be worrying about rewinding to hear what weird name I just had them say for the magic stuff. So yeah, it had to just flow.
And could you kind of like mention kind of quickly of like your choosing a narrator? Do you have like say over that, or of like who would you want to have as a narrator? Because you had a narrator for You Had Me At Hola, and you're in the process of doing a lot like Adios for Audible.
That one should already be out.
It's already out. I have it on audiobook. I was like, sis, I already have it on I texted you. I was like, I have it on audio. Like, I have it.
That's right.
Yeah, that is Serafina Valentine, who I think is just a great romance narrator. So she does that series. But What the Hex is narrated by Jacqueline Grace Lopez, who, there's a little fun story there, which you know Grace because you saw her Instagram live, where she read You Had Me At Hola last year, I guess, and had reached out to me to tell me, you know, that she liked the book. So we would kind of like chat a little bit on Instagram. And then when I announced this project, she put in an audition for it. And she just did a great job, you know, really bringing Kat and Diego and everybody around them to life. And
such a small world. Such a small world. So kind of, I know we're going to start wrapping up soon, but do you kind of want to like how you kind of didn't really choose the audio narrators? What about your covers? Did you have any say for that, for like What the Hex? And because like the cartoon covers, I love like a lot like Adios. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. I love it. So like, did you have any say in that, or like was it kind of like your publisher was just like, here?
Yeah, I mean, I do still have this, like, I get some say in the narrators too. They're like, here are some auditions that you can listen to. And with the covers, I will just say that most authors, I think, do not get a lot of say in their covers. But I do have a background in visual arts and computer arts. That's what my degree is in. I've done this work. So I have a lot of opinions. And I'm basically like, I will not promote a book if I don't like the cover. So
right.
And I have like a very clear vision of how I think it should be packaged, and I'm always willing to listen to other ideas, of course, or say, I don't know exactly about this kind, what do you guys think? But for both What the Hex and the Primas of Power series, I suggested those artists. Bofeng Lin does the covers for You Had Me At Hola and a lot like Adios. And then Maria Dresden did the cover for What the Hex. She's based in Spain and Bo is in Germany. And I've been following them on Instagram for years and had actually reached out to them both in the past about different things. Like I'd reached out to Bo for something and I couldn't afford him. But when I knew that we were going to do illustrated covers for the series, I said, that's fine, but I want them to look a certain way. I do not want them to look like XYZ. And he just knocked it out of the park, like beyond my wildest dreams, like even better than I could have imagined. And for What the Hex, I did look at other Audible original novellas and see what the covers were. And I really like analyzed them and I put together this whole concept. And they were like, wow, we've never received a cover concept this detailed before, Alexis. I was like, I'm sorry, I just want to cover all my bases. But, you know, I said, why don't we kind of make it like, you know, the way some of these reality TV posters are, where you've got like some people in the front, then you got the whole family with the house and everything behind them. So I made like a mock-up of it and I could just see it in Maria's style. Like I was like, I know she can do this and it's going to look amazing and just like so cute and fun. And I wanted it to have that vibe of it is a paranormal rom-com. And I knew that my readers were going to be coming over a little bit more from the rom-com side. So I was like, let's lean on showing that it's a rom-com with magic as opposed to like a paranormal with humor, because what the paranormal covers look like is very different. And I felt like that would be too much of a jump. But she just did a great job, really like getting all of the characters. And like I sent like outfits for every single one of them on that cover. I was like, here's what they look like, here's what kind of clothing they're going to be wearing, you know. And then I ended up sending all of that to Jacqueline too, to give her a sense of who all of these different characters were. And she said that that was helpful in, you know, determining what kind of voices they would have. So it worked out. I'm really happy with it. It was a great project to be part of.
It did work out because like, honestly, those covers, I love them so much. When I first ever saw the You Had Me At Hola, I was just like, oh my gosh, this, and it's so completely different from like, you know, the toonish contemporary romances that we see. And now we have this beautiful cover but done by an amazing artist. I follow him on Instagram as well.
So
and I love the style so much, and it just feels so Latinx that I'm just like, yes. And it's so different. Yes, it's like, you know, toonish, but it stands on its own in that like segment, and it's done such a beautiful job. And then like the What the Hex cover, I love it so much. I love like that type of like drawing style of characters where it's like it's kind of 2D, but it still feels like so much emotion in those little facial reactions. Thought they were pretty amazing and they were really, really good. I love them so much.
I think there's some people who think that it's like a YA book because it's a little bit cartoonier, and I'm like, oh well, you are in for a surprise. I hope children are not listening.
Definitely not.
I mean, I think the blurb is pretty clear.
Yeah,
but
it's definitely clear. Otherwise they would get to, first of all, the tension in the first closet scene. I already knew that it was going to be like one that I definitely was going to want to enjoy their romance, because I just felt it. But yeah, if you are a YA Audible listener, you'll know pretty soon. Yeah, you'll know
if
pretty
you're an
soon.
Actual child, don't
do
listen to that one.
Yeah.
Please do not. So to kind of wrap up, because we are short on time, could you, on the topic of rom-coms, what are your 3 top rom-coms that you would recommend?
Such a hard question. Okay, so there's one for sure that I always say, The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa.
Yes.
It is like pure rom-com. It's got the rom, it's got the com, and it's just so sexy and funny. So
yeah,
love
I
that.
definitely have been eyeing that one. I see it on like the shelves and I'm like, that looks good. I'm like, does it have an audiobook? Because I'm getting into
does.
audiobooks now, and it does. And I saw it on my e-library, and I was like, oh, I think it's time. It is time. So maybe I
Yes,
will pick
it's
it up
time.
because of your recommendation. So
It is, and the heroine in it is Brazilian, and they did get a Brazilian narrator for the female
oh,
narrator.
that's great.
I love that.
And Mia is Puerto Rican and Brazilian,
Yeah.
and it's so funny.
Yeah, and then
So hot.
Wedding Crashers is also coming out.
Coming out in the spring, yeah.
Yes.
I am still waiting for Mia to send me a copy to read. I did get to read some of it. I did, but I want like the actual work now. So then the next one I would say is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, which came out this summer.
Classic,
And
so good.
if you like Schitt's Creek, the heroine in this book is very much like Alexis Rose, and very lovable and also very hot. Very romantic book too.
Yeah. The second book, Hook, Line, and Sinker, is equally as good.
Okay,
It's
I have an
so
arc for
good.
that on my shelf, but
I read it, I think 2 months ago. I got an arc for it, and I was like, oh, she did not hold back either again. It's
can't
so
wait.
good. It's really good.
And then I struggled with this third one, but I'm gonna go with The Kiss Quotient.
We love the Kiss Quotient here. I just finished The Bride Test on Friday, and
The Bride Test.
it was so. I have The Heart Principle too. I'm gonna read that soon, but that series is so good. That's such a good series.
That was the struggle, whether I said Kiss Quotient or Bride Test, and I was like, well, let me go with the first one, and then
because the whole series is
the whole series.
So.
Every one of them in that family, chef's kiss. I love them.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
Well, thank you, Alexis, for coming on, and thank you to all of our listeners who have been listening to this episode of the 4th week in October for us. And Grace, do you have anything else to add?
I want to thank you so much for coming on. You were definitely one of the authors that I was most excited to have on, because I definitely look up to you, and I thank you for everything that you do, and your stories are incredible. And I just want to say thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on, for reading and helping spread the word and being #1 fan of What the Hex. But yeah, I had a great time. These were great questions. I wish you both so much luck with your joint project. We will get there. I know it.
Thank you so much.
Keep you posted.
Yes. Thank you to everybody who's listened, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.